The dust had barely settled from the outlaw raid that killed her husband when Clara Ashford climbed aboard the westbound Stagecoach, her hands trembling as she gripped the door frame, knowing that the world had shown her nothing but violence and now expected more of the same. The November sun of 1878 beat down on the wooden coach as it prepared to depart from San Antonio, carrying 6 passengers toward Johnson City, Texas, a small settlement she had never seen but where her late husband's brother had promised her work and shelter. Clara's black mourning dress clung to her frame, still dusty from the hasty burial 3 days prior, and her green eyes held the hollow look of someone who had witnessed too much death in her 22 years. The other passengers eyed her with varying degrees of suspicion and pity. A portly merchant sat across from her, his jowls quivering with each bump in the road. Beside him, a stern-faced woman in her 50s clutched her carpetbag as though it contained all the treasures of Solomon. 2 miners heading toward the hill country occupied the facing bench, their clothes stiff with dried sweat and dirt. They all seemed to sense that Clara was alone, unprotected, and in the wild territories of Texas in 1878 that made her either prey or a burden. The journey took 2 full days, with an overnight stop at a way station where Clara slept fitfully in a corner of the common room, her small traveling bag clutched to her chest. The merchant had tried to strike up conversation during the first day, his questions probing about her circumstances, her destination, her lack of male protection. She had answered in monosyllables, her voice barely above a whisper, until he finally lost interest. The older woman never spoke at all, just watched with disapproving eyes that seemed to judge Clara for traveling alone, for being young and widowed, for existing in a space she clearly believed Clara had no right to occupy. By the time they approached Johnson City on the second afternoon, Clara's entire body ached from the constant jostling. The town materialized out of the golden grasslands like a mirage, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along a dusty main street with the Pedernales River glinting silver in the distance. It was smaller than she had imagined, more vulnerable, a fragile human settlement carved out of the vast Texas wilderness. The stagecoach driver, a grizzled man named Pete who had spoken perhaps 20 words during the entire journey, called out their arrival as he pulled the horses to a stop outside the general store. Clara felt her chest tighten as the coach came to rest. This was it. The end of one journey and the beginning of another, in a town where she knew no one except a brother-in-law she had met only once at her wedding. Thomas Ashford had seemed kind enough in that brief encounter, but that had been 3 years ago, and people changed. More importantly, she was about to become a charity case, dependent on his goodness for her very survival. The thought made her throat constrict with shame and fear. The merchant disembarked first, grunting as he heaved himself down. The older woman followed, assisted by Pete. The miners jumped down with easy athleticism, already looking toward the saloon at the end of the street. Clara remained frozen in her seat, her hands gripping the edge of the bench, unable to make her body move. Through the window, she could see townspeople going about their business, and several had stopped to watch the stagecoach's arrival. Their faces were curious, some welcoming, others neutral, but Clara saw only potential threats. Every man was someone who might take advantage of her vulnerability. Every woman was someone who might look down on her reduced circumstances. She forced herself to stand, her legs unsteady after so many hours of sitting. As she moved toward the door, her boot caught on the hem of her dress, and she stumbled, catching herself against the door frame. The sudden movement made her vision swim, and she realized she had eaten almost nothing in 2 days, too anxious to keep food down. The ground seemed very far away as she looked down at the step, and she was acutely aware of how weak she felt, how close to collapse. Then a shadow fell across the doorway, and a hand appeared in her line of vision. It was a strong hand, tanned and calloused, attached to an arm in a faded blue shirt. Clara's gaze traveled upward to find a man standing below, looking up at her with an expression of genuine concern. He was tall, perhaps 25 or 26 years old, with dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of warm honey. His face was weathered by sun and wind but open, without the hardness she had come to expect from men in these territories. "Madam," he said, his voice a low drawl that carried the soft edges of someone who had grown up in Texas. "Let me help you down. You look about ready to fall over." Clara hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to refuse to maintain what little independence she had left. But her body was making decisions her mind could not override, and she found herself placing her hand in his. His grip was firm but careful, his other hand coming to steady her elbow as she navigated the high step down from the coach. When her feet touched the ground, her knees buckled slightly and his hold tightened, keeping her upright. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "You are safe. Gentleness starts now." The words hit Clara with unexpected force, and she felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely, unwilling to break down in the middle of the street in front of strangers. But something in the simple declaration, the quiet certainty with which he spoke, created a hairline fracture in the protective wall she had built around herself. She looked up at him, really looked, and saw nothing predatory in his gaze, only kindness and a steady strength that seemed entirely at her disposal rather than threatening to overwhelm her. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice hoarse from disuse. He released her arm slowly, making sure she was steady before stepping back. "Henry Roswell," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I work at the Rocking H Ranch just outside town. You are new to Johnson City." It was a statement rather than a question, but Clara nodded anyway. "I am looking for Thomas Ashford. Do you know where I might find him?" A flicker of something passed across Henry's face, too quick for her to identify. "I know Tom. He runs the lumber operation on the north side of town. I can take you there if you would like." Before Clara could respond, Pete had climbed down from the driver's seat and was hauling bags from the top of the coach. He tossed Clara's small traveling bag down, and Henry caught it with one hand, the movement casual and efficient. Clara reached for it, but Henry shook his head. "I will carry it. You look like a strong wind would knock you over. When did you last eat?" The direct question caught her off guard. "I am fine." "That is not what I asked." His tone was gentle but persistent. "The restaurant here serves a decent meal. Let me buy you lunch before I take you to Tom." "I cannot accept that." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I do not know you and I have no means to repay you. Did not ask for repayment." Henry shifted the bag to his other hand. "But if it makes you feel better, consider it a welcome to Johnson City. We are a small town. We look after folks, especially those who are traveling alone." He paused, his eyes taking in her morning dress, the shadows under her eyes, the way she held herself as though expecting a blow. "Especially those who have had a hard time of it recently." Clara wanted to refuse again, but her stomach chose that moment to emit a low growl that was audible in the quiet afternoon air. Henry's expression did not change, but she saw the corner of his mouth twitch slightly. Despite herself, she felt a ghost of a smile tug at her own lips, the first in what felt like months. "One meal," she said finally, "and then I need to find Thomas." "One meal," Henry agreed, and gestured toward a building across the street with a painted sign that read Maggie's Restaurant and Boarding House. They crossed the dusty street together, Henry matching his pace to hers, and Clara was aware of eyes following them. In a town this size, the arrival of a stranger would be notable, and being escorted by one of the local men even more so. She tried not to care what conclusions people might draw. She was too tired, too hungry, and too worn down to worry about propriety. Besides, what reputation did she have left to protect? She was a widow at 22, penniless and alone, seeking charity from family who might not even want her. The restaurant was blessedly cool inside, with windows that let in light but kept out the worst of the afternoon heat. A woman in her 40s, presumably Maggie, looked up from where she was wiping down tables and smiled broadly at Henry. Henry Roswell, twice in 1 week. I am starting to think you do not like my cooking well enough to stay away. Her eyes shifted to Clara, and her smile gentled. And you have brought a guest. Welcome, dear. Sit anywhere you like. Henry guided Clara to a table near the window, pulling out a chair for her before she could do it herself. The small courtesy made her throat tighten again. It had been so long since anyone had shown her even basic kindness. He set her bag on the floor beside her chair and took the seat across from her, removing his hat and setting it on the empty chair beside him. Maggie approached with 2 glasses of water, setting them on the table with practiced efficiency. We have stew today, venison with vegetables and fresh bread. Apple pie for dessert if you have room. 2 bowls of stew and bread, Henry said, and 2 slices of pie to follow. Clara opened her mouth to protest, but Henry shook his head. When someone offers you food in Texas, you accept it. That is just good manners. Maggie laughed and patted Clara on the shoulder. He is right about that, and you look like you could use a good meal, sweetheart. I will be right back. As Maggie bustled away, Clara found herself alone with Henry in the comfortable silence of the restaurant. She sipped her water, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat, and studied the man across from her. He seemed at ease in his own skin, comfortable with silence, not needing to fill the space with empty chatter. His hands rested on the table, relaxed, and she noted again the calluses, the signs of hard physical labor. A working man, then, not a gambler or a drifter. You said you work on a ranch, she asked finally, feeling the need to break the silence. Henry nodded. The Rocking H. Owned by William Hartley and his wife, Anne. They run cattle mostly, though we have been bringing in some horses too. I have been there 5 years now, started as a hand and worked my way up to foreman last year. That is quite an accomplishment. Clara meant it. Ranch work was brutal, and foreman positions went to men who could handle both the physical demands and the responsibility of managing other workers. I like the work. Henry's expression softened slightly. Cattle are straightforward. You treat them right, give them what they need, they do fine. Same with horses, though they are smarter and know when you are trying to fool them. He paused. People are more complicated. Yes, Clara agreed quietly. They are. Maggie returned with 2 steaming bowls of stew and a basket of bread wrapped in a checkered cloth. The aroma that rose from the bowls made Clara's mouth water, and she realized she was far hungrier than she had allowed herself to acknowledge. She picked up her spoon with trembling fingers and brought a bite to her lips. The stew was rich and flavorful, the meat tender, the vegetables cooked to perfection. She closed her eyes briefly, savoring it, and when she opened them, she found Henry watching her with an expression that was almost tender. Good, he asked simply. Very good, she confirmed and took another bite. They ate in companionable silence for several minutes, and Clara felt some of the tension begin to drain from her shoulders. The food settled warmly in her stomach, and color started to return to her face. She was halfway through the bowl before she remembered her manners and looked up at Henry apologetically. I am being rude, eating like I have never seen food before. You are being hungry, Henry corrected. That is not rude. That is human." He tore off a piece of bread and used it to soak up some of the stew. "I take it the journey from San Antonio was not pleasant." "It was bearable." Clara chose her words carefully, not wanting to seem like she was complaining. "The other passengers kept to themselves, mostly." Henry's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mostly?" One man asked too many questions, a merchant, but he lost interest when I did not answer. She met Henry's gaze. "I am sure he meant no harm." "Maybe." Henry did not sound convinced, "but traveling alone is risky." "What brings you to Johnson City, if you do not mind me asking?" Clara set down her spoon, the story she had told herself 100 times now needing to be spoken aloud. "My husband died 3 weeks ago. Outlaws attacked our homestead outside San Antonio. He tried to fight them off, and they shot him." The words came out flat, emotionless, because if she let herself feel while saying them, she would shatter. "He had a brother here, Thomas. Tom wrote after the funeral and said there was work for me here that I could help with the lumber office. I had nowhere else to go." Henry was quiet for a long moment, his expression grave. "I am sorry for your loss. That is a hard thing to bear." "Yes." Clara picked up her spoon again, needing something to do with her hands. "But many women are widowed young out here. I am not unique in that." "Maybe not," Henry agreed, "but that does not make it easier." He hesitated, then said carefully, "Tom is a decent man, but he has his own troubles. His lumber business has been struggling some. I just want you to know that so you are prepared." Clara's heart sank. If Thomas's business was failing, he might not be able to employ her after all. She might have come all this way for nothing. "I see." "That does not mean he will not help you," Henry added quickly, seeing her distress. "Just that things might be tighter than you expected." "But Johnson City is a growing town. There are other opportunities if the lumber office does not work out." "Like what?" Clara did not mean to sound bitter, but the words came out sharp. "I can cook and clean and keep a house, but I am no seamstress and I have no formal education." "What opportunities exist for a woman like me?" Henry regarded her steadily. "Maggie might need help here at the restaurant. The school teacher, Miss Paulson, has been talking about wanting an assistant now that the town is growing and more families are arriving. Doc Henderson's wife runs the general store and has mentioned needing someone to help with inventory. You could do any of those things, seems to me." The fact that he had answers, real possibilities rather than empty reassurances, eased some of the panic rising in Clara's chest. "You seem to know a lot about the town. Been here 5 years, like I said. You get to know folks in that time." Henry finished his stew and pushed the bowl aside. "Johnson City is a good place. People here look after each other. You will be all right." There was such certainty in his voice that Clara almost believed him. She finished her own stew and nibbled at the bread, her appetite satisfied but not wanting to waste the food. True to her word, Maggie appeared with 2 generous slices of apple pie, the crust golden and flaky, the filling fragrant with cinnamon. "I cannot possibly eat all that," Clara protested. "Then take it with you," Maggie said practically. "Pie keeps well enough and you might want it later." They ate their pie slowly, and Henry told her more about the town. About William and Ann Hartley, who had founded the Rocking H Ranch 15 years ago when this was still wild frontier, and the threat of Comanche raids was constant. About the town itself, which had grown up around a natural ford in the Pedernales River, and now served as a supply point for the ranches and farms spreading across the hill country. About the people who lived here, the shopkeepers and craftsmen, the families carving out lives in this beautiful, harsh land. Clara listened, absorbing it all, and slowly the knot of fear in her chest began to loosen. Henry spoke about Johnson City with genuine affection, and his words painted a picture of a community rather than just a collection of strangers. It gave her something she had not felt in weeks: hope. When they finally finished, Henry insisted on paying despite Clara's protests. He collected her bag and they stepped back out into the afternoon sun, which had shifted lower in the sky. The day was beginning to cool, the November air pleasant now that the worst heat had passed. "The lumber yard is this way," Henry said, turning north along the main street. They walked past the general store, a blacksmith shop where the ring of hammer on anvil provided a steady rhythm, and a small church with white painted walls. At the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to grassland and scattered oak trees, a large open area held stacks of lumber in various stages of processing. A wooden building that appeared to be part office and part workshop stood at one end, smoke rising from a chimney. As they approached, a man emerged from the building, wiping his hands on a rag. He was in his early 30s, with sandy hair and a face that shared some features with Clara's late husband. When he saw her, he stopped abruptly, recognition dawning on his face. "Clara." Thomas Ashford crossed the space between them quickly. "Clara, is that you? I was not expecting you until next week." "The stage schedule changed," Clara explained, her voice uncertain. "I hope my early arrival is not a problem." Thomas shook his head, his expression a mixture of welcome and worry. No, of course not. You are welcome anytime. I am just sorry you had to make the journey at all when I heard about James, about what happened." He trailed off, pain flickering across his face. "He was my brother. I should have been there." "There was nothing you could have done," Clara said quietly. "They came at dawn, 4 of them. It was over in minutes." Thomas looked at the ground, his jaw working. When he looked up again, his eyes were wet. "Come inside, we will get you settled. I have a room ready at the boarding house and we can talk about the work I mentioned in my letter." Henry, who had been standing back to give them space, stepped forward now. "Tom, good to see you." Thomas turned to him, seeming to register his presence for the first time. "Henry." "Did you bring Clara from the Stagecoach?" "I did. She looked like she needed some assistance, so I offered." Henry held out Clara's bag. "I will leave you two to talk. Clara, welcome to Johnson City. I hope things work out well for you here." "Thank you," Clara said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised her. "For everything. The meal, the conversation, the kindness. I will not forget it." Something warm flickered in Henry's honey-colored eyes. "I am at the Rocking H if you need anything. Anyone in town can tell you how to find it. Tom, I will see you at the council meeting next week." Thomas nodded, and Henry touched the brim of his hat one more time before turning and walking back toward the main street, his long strides eating up the ground. Clara watched him go, feeling oddly bereft at his departure. He had been a stranger an hour ago, and now his leaving felt like losing something important. Thomas noticed her watching and smiled slightly. "Henry Roswell is one of the good ones. If he has taken an interest in helping you, that is a very good sign. He does not extend himself for just anyone." Clara flushed and turned her attention back to her brother-in-law. "You mentioned a room at the boarding house." "Yes, Maggie's place. She has a room ready, and I have paid for the first 2 weeks while you get settled." Thomas gestured toward the office. "But let me show you around first, explain what I need help with." They spent the next hour in the lumber office, and Clara began to understand what Henry had meant about Thomas's struggles. The paperwork was in disarray, orders mixed with receipts, correspondence with suppliers stacked haphazardly. The books were weeks behind, and it was clear Thomas had been trying to manage both the physical work of running a lumber operation and the administrative tasks without enough hours in the day to do either properly. "I am a carpenter, not a clerk," Thomas said with a rueful laugh, running a hand through his hair. "I can cut lumber and build a house, but this organizational work defeats me. James was always the one who was good with numbers and records. I thought I could manage, but I am drowning here. I can help with this, Clara said, surveying the chaos with a critical eye. She had managed the household accounts at the homestead, kept track of their crops and livestock, handled the correspondence with the buyers for their produce. This was more complex, but not fundamentally different. It will take some time to sort it all out, but it is doable. Relief washed over Thomas's face. That would be wonderful. I can pay you a small wage, not much, but enough to cover your room and board with a little extra. And if we can get the business running more smoothly, maybe more in the future. That is more than fair, Clara assured him. When would you like me to start? Would tomorrow be too soon? Thomas looked almost embarrassed to ask. I know you just arrived, and you must be exhausted, but I have a large order due to go out in 3 days, and I cannot find the specifications the customer sent. Clara almost laughed. After weeks of grief and fear and uncertainty, being needed for something practical felt almost therapeutic. Tomorrow is fine. I will come early after breakfast. They walked back to the boarding house together, Thomas carrying her bag now and telling her more about the lumber business, the challenges of getting supplies, the competition from larger operations in San Antonio and Austin. Clara listened and asked questions, her mind already organizing the problems into categories, planning how she would tackle the mess in that office. Maggie greeted them warmly at the boarding house and showed Clara to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. It had a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the main street. After the cramped stagecoach and the frightening emptiness of the homestead after James died, it felt like luxury. Breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6, Maggie explained. Chamber pot is under the bed, but there is also an outhouse out back if you prefer. Bath is Saturday nights, but if you need one sooner, let me know and I can heat water. This is perfect, Clara said honestly. Thank you for your hospitality. Henry already paid for your meal earlier, so you are set for dinner tonight too, Maggie added. That man has a good heart, even if he does not talk much about it. When Maggie and Thomas had both left her alone, Clara sat on the edge of the bed and let herself breathe. She had made it. Against all odds, despite her fears, she had arrived in Johnson City and found not cruelty but kindness. Thomas had work for her. She had a place to sleep and food to eat. And there had been Henry, appearing at exactly the moment she needed help, offering it without expectation or demand. Gentleness starts now. The words echoed in her mind as she lay back on the bed, her body finally relaxing after days of tension. She did not know if she believed in fresh starts or new beginnings. The pain of losing James was too raw, the memory of violence too recent. But maybe, just maybe, there was a possibility of something different here, something softer, something that did not require her to live in constant fear and vigilance. She fell asleep fully clothed on top of the blankets and did not wake until Maggie knocked on her door to call her for dinner. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting. Clara rose with the sun, ate breakfast in the boarding house dining room with the other residents, a rotating cast of travelers and permanent lodgers, then walked to the lumber yard. She spent her mornings sorting through the chaos of Thomas's office, creating order from disorder, and her afternoons handling correspondence and updating the account books. The work was absorbing enough to keep her dark thoughts at bay, and Thomas was a kind employer, patient with her questions and grateful for her help. The people of Johnson City proved to be as welcoming as Henry had suggested. Maggie mothered her relentlessly, always making sure she ate enough and did not work too hard. The shopkeepers greeted her by name after only a few days. Even the town marshal, a weathered man named Frank Cooper, tipped his hat when he saw her, and told her to come find him if she ever needed assistance. But it was Henry she found herself thinking about, and that troubled her. She had been widowed less than a month. The grief was still fresh, the wound still open. She had no business thinking about another man, no business noticing the way her heart lifted when she saw him riding through town, or remembering the warmth in his eyes when he had helped her from the stagecoach. It felt like a betrayal of James, of the life they had tried to build together. She did not see Henry for several days after her arrival, though she heard his name mentioned frequently. He came into town once during that first week, riding past the lumber yard on his way to the general store, and he had waved at her through the office window. She had waved back, fighting the urge to go outside and talk to him, to thank him again, to hear his voice. It was foolish. She was being foolish. The following Sunday, Clara attended church services at the small white building she had noticed her first day in town. The interior was simple, with wooden pews and a plain altar, but the congregation sang with enthusiasm, and the young pastor, Reverend Matthews, delivered a sermon about hope and renewal that made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. Afterward, people crowded around to introduce themselves, and Clara felt overwhelmed by the genuine warmth of their welcome. She was standing on the church steps, about to walk back to the boarding house, when she saw Henry approaching. He was dressed more formally than she had seen him before, in clean trousers and a white shirt with a black vest, his hair damp as though he had washed up before coming to town. He climbed the steps to where she stood and removed his hat. "Miss Ashford," he greeted her, "it is good to see you. How are you settling in?" "Well, thank you," Clara replied, aware of the eyes watching them from the churchyard. "The work is keeping me busy and everyone has been very kind." "Good. That is good." Henry shifted his weight, suddenly seeming less certain than she had seen him before. "I was wondering if you might like to take a walk. It is a nice day, and I thought I could show you some of the area around town. But if you would rather not, or if you have other plans, I understand." Clara knew she should say no. It was too soon, too presumptuous, too much like something she had no right to want. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "I would like that. Let me just tell Maggie I will not be back for a while." Relief and pleasure crossed Henry's face, and Clara felt an answering warmth in her chest. They walked together back to the boarding house, where Maggie saw them coming and grinned broadly, waving them off when Clara tried to explain. Then Henry led her past the last buildings of the town and onto a path that followed the river. The November afternoon was perfect, cool and clear, with the trees beginning to show their autumn colors. The Pedernales River ran shallow here, burbling over limestone rocks, and the hills rolled away to the horizon, covered in oak and juniper. Henry walked beside her at an easy pace, not talking at first, just letting her take in the beauty of the landscape. "It is peaceful here," Clara said finally. "Different from San Antonio." "It is," Henry agreed. "That is part of why I stayed. When I first came to Texas, I was running from something. My father died when I was young, and my mother remarried a man who liked his fists more than his family. Soon as I was old enough, I left Missouri and kept going until I found a place that felt right. This was it." Clara glanced at him, surprised by the confession. "I am sorry. That must have been difficult," Henry shrugged. "It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important. It taught me that gentleness is a choice, not a weakness. My stepfather thought being hard, being cruel made him strong, but really it just made him small. The strongest people I have met, like William Hartley, like your brother-in-law Tom, they are the ones who are kind even when they do not have to be." "Is that why you said what you did when you helped me from the stagecoach?" Clara asked. "About gentleness starting now?" Henry nodded slowly. You looked like you were expecting the world to hit you again. I wanted you to know that not everyone here would." He paused, then added quietly, "I know what it is like to brace for a blow that might not come. It is exhausting. I thought maybe I could ease that, even just a little." Clara felt tears prick her eyes again, and she blinked them back. "You did. You have no idea how much." They walked in silence for a while, following the river path as it wound through stands of oak trees. Henry pointed out landmarks, told her about the history of the area, explained which plants were useful for medicine or food. Clara listened, absorbing it all, and gradually felt herself relaxing in a way she had not since before James died. There was something deeply calming about Henry's presence, a steadiness that made her feel safe. "Can I ask you something?" Henry said eventually. "And if it is too personal, you can tell me to mind my own business. All right. Your husband, the man you lost, were you happy with him?" Clara considered the question carefully. It would have been easy to say yes, to paint James as a perfect husband and their marriage as ideal. But something about Henry made her want to be honest, even when honesty was complicated. "I was content," she said finally. "James was a good man, a hard worker. He never raised his voice to me, never lifted a hand. After what I grew up with, that alone seemed like enough. My father was a drinker, and when he drank, he got mean. My mother died trying to protect me from one of his rages. So when James offered marriage, offered a homestead and safety, I took it. I was 18 and desperate for anything better than what I had." "But you were not happy," Henry said gently. "I did not know what happy felt like," Clara admitted. "Content seemed good enough. James and I worked together well. We were building something, but there was not much tenderness between us. He married me because he needed a wife to help run the homestead. I married him to escape my father. That is not the foundation for great love, I suppose. But you grieve him still." "Of course. He did not deserve to die that way. He was a good person, and our life together was not bad, just not." She trailed off, unsure how to finish. "Not what you hoped for," Henry supplied. "Maybe, or maybe I never let myself hope for more than survival." Clara looked at him curiously. "What about you? Have you ever been married?" "No. Came close once, few years back. Girl named Susan, daughter of a rancher over in Blanco County. She was pretty and sweet, and I thought maybe that was enough. But her father wanted her to marry a man with land of his own, not a hired hand. And when I really looked at what we had, I realized I was not willing to fight for it. If it had been real love, I would have fought heaven and earth to be with her. Since I did not, I figured it was not meant to be." "Do you regret it?" "No. Susan married a farmer and seems happy. I stayed at the rocking H and worked my way up to foreman. Things turned out the way they were supposed to." Henry stopped walking and turned to face her. "But I learned something from that. I learned I do not want to settle for contentment. When I marry, if I marry, I want it to be because I cannot imagine my life without that person. I want partnership and passion and the kind of love that makes you willing to face anything together." Clara's breath caught at the intensity in his voice, at the clear implication of why he was telling her this. "Henry, I am not asking for anything," he said quickly. "You have only been in town a week. You are grieving and you need time, I understand that. But I want you to know my intentions, Clara. From the moment I saw you standing in that stagecoach door, looking scared and brave and beautiful all at once, I felt something shift in me. I would like the chance to get to know you, to let you get to know me. To see if what I am feeling might be something you could feel too when you are ready." "It is too soon," Clara whispered, but even as she said it, she knew she was fighting herself more than him. Because she did feel something, had felt it from that first moment when he took her hand and promised gentleness. "James has only been dead 3 weeks. I know. That is why I am not asking for anything now. I am just asking for the possibility of something later. Time to talk, to walk like this, to be friends. And if friendship is all it ever becomes, I will accept that. But if it becomes more—" He let the sentence hang, leaving the possibility open. Clara looked up at him, at his honest face and kind eyes, and felt something crack open in her chest. The grief was still there, the guilt and confusion and pain. But underneath it, fragile as a new seedling, was something that felt like hope. Not hope for what had been, but hope for what might be. "Friends," she said finally. "I can agree to that. But slowly, Henry, I need to go slowly." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Slowly is fine. I am a patient man." They walked back toward town as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Henry told her more stories about the ranch, about William and Anne Hartley and their 2 teenage children, about the horses he was training and the expansion plans for the spring. Clara found herself laughing at his descriptions of a particularly stubborn mare named Delilah, who refused to accept a saddle, and his patient efforts to win her trust. When they reached the boarding house, Henry handed her up the front steps with the same care he had shown helping her from the stagecoach. "Thank you for the walk," he said. "I enjoyed the conversation." "So did I," Clara admitted. "More than I expected to. Maybe we could do it again." "Next Sunday after church? I would like that." Henry's smile widened, and he touched the brim of his hat before turning to walk away. Clara watched him go, then slipped inside the boarding house, her mind whirling with everything that had happened, everything that had been said. She knew there would be talk, that people would notice Henry's attention and draw conclusions. She knew she should probably be more cautious, more protective of her reputation. But for the first time since James died, she felt like she was moving towards something instead of just running away. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Henry came to town every Sunday, and after church services, he and Clara would walk together. Sometimes they followed the river path. Other times they explored the hills around Johnson City or simply strolled through the town itself. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their pasts and their dreams, learning the contours of each other's thoughts. Clara learned that Henry loved horses with a passion that bordered on devotion, that he could read the weather by watching how the cattle moved, that he had taught himself to read using an old Bible and sheer determination. She learned that he sent money back to Missouri to help support a younger sister who had been too small to escape when he did, and that he carried guilt about leaving her behind even though he had been just 16 himself. Henry learned that Clara had a sharp mind for numbers and organization, that she loved the sound of rain on a roof and the smell of fresh bread, that she had always wanted to see the ocean but probably never would. He learned that she blamed herself for James's death, believing that if she had been better at shooting or braver or somehow different, she might have been able to save him. "That is not how it works," Henry said gently when she confessed this. "You cannot save someone from that kind of violence by wishing you were different. Those outlaws made a choice. James made a choice to fight them. You survived. That is not a failing." "But I did nothing," Clara insisted, tears streaming down her face. They were sitting on a fallen log by the river, and she had finally told him the whole story, the details she had not been able to speak aloud before. "I hid in the root cellar like a coward while they killed him." "You survived," Henry repeated. "That is not nothing. That is everything. James would want you to live, Clara, not to carry guilt that is not yours to bear." She cried then, really cried for the first time since the funeral. Henry held her carefully, his arms strong and steady around her, and did not try to shush her or tell her everything was fine. He just held her while she grieved, and when the storm passed, he offered her his handkerchief and did not comment on the fact that she had soaked his shirt with tears. "Thank you," she said shakily. "I am sorry for falling apart. Do not be. Grief needs to come out somewhere. Better here, where you are safe, than trapped inside where it can poison you." Henry brushed a strand of hair back from her face, the gesture tender. "You are stronger than you know, Clara." Christmas approached, and Johnson City prepared for the holiday with enthusiastic decorations and planning. The church organized a community dinner, and families brought dishes to share. Clara helped Maggie bake pies for the event, working in the boarding house kitchen and finding unexpected pleasure in the domestic task. It reminded her of better times before her mother died, when the kitchen had been a place of warmth and safety. Henry invited her to spend Christmas Day at the Rocking H Ranch, and Clara accepted despite her nervousness about meeting his employers. He picked her up in a wagon early on Christmas morning, and they drove out of town into the rolling hill country. The ranch appeared after about an hour's drive, a sprawling operation with a large main house, several barns, corrals full of horses and cattle, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. William and Anne Hartley greeted Clara with genuine warmth, and their children, 16-year-old John and 14-year-old Mary, were shy but friendly. The house was decorated with pine boughs and candles, and the smell of roasting turkey filled the air. Clara found herself relaxing into the family atmosphere, helping Anne in the kitchen and talking with Mary about her schoolwork. "Henry talks about you all the time," Mary confided when they were alone for a moment. "He has never brought anyone out here before. You must be special." Clara felt her cheeks heat. "We are friends." "Maybe," Mary said with a knowing smile that seemed too old for her years. "But he looks at you the way my father looks at my mother. That is more than friendship." Later, after a feast that left everyone pleasantly stuffed, they sat around the fireplace in the main house. William told stories about the early days of the ranch, when Comanche raids were a constant threat, and every day was a struggle for survival. Anne talked about the community they had built, the families who had settled nearby, the school they had helped establish. Henry sat beside Clara on the sofa, close enough that their shoulders touched, and she felt the warmth of his presence like a physical thing. As the sun set and it was time for Clara to return to town, Henry walked her out to the wagon. In the privacy of the gathering darkness, he took her hand. "I am glad you came today," he said. "It felt right having you here, like you belong." Clara squeezed his hand, unable to put into words what the day had meant to her. The inclusion, the normality, the sense of being part of something larger than herself. "Thank you for inviting me. Your employers are wonderful people." "They are, and they liked you." "Anne told me privately that you are welcome anytime." Henry hesitated, then added, "She also said I should not let you get away." "Did she?" Clara smiled despite herself. "She is a wise woman." Henry lifted Clara's hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, the gesture courtly and sweet. "Clara, I know it has only been a couple of months. I know you are still healing. But I need you to know that I am falling in love with you. I have probably been falling since the moment I saw you, and I will wait as long as you need me to, but I wanted you to know where my heart stands." Clara's breath caught. She knew she should tell him it was too soon, that she was not ready, that he needed to be patient. But looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability and honesty there, she found herself telling the truth instead. "I think I am falling too," she whispered. "And that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I do not trust it. I do not trust that good things can last. Every time I have been happy, something has come along to destroy it. What if that happens again?" Henry cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "Then we will face it together." Life does not come with guarantees, Clara. Bad things happen. People die. Plans fall apart, but you cannot let fear of what might happen stop you from living. I would rather have 1 year of real happiness with you than a lifetime of playing it safe and never feeling anything at all. 1 year might be all we get, Clara said, voicing her deepest fear. Then we would make it the best year possible, Henry replied. But I think we will get more than that. I think we will get 50 years, a house full of children, a lifetime of sunsets and conversations and waking up beside each other. I think we will get everything if we are brave enough to reach for it. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were not tears of grief this time. They were tears of possibility, of hope, of the terrifying and exhilarating realization that she was standing on the edge of something real, something that could change everything. I am not ready to marry you, she said, needing to be clear. Not yet. But I am ready to stop pretending this is just friendship. I am ready to see where this goes. Henry's smile was incandescent. That is all I ask. He kissed her then, softly and carefully, and Clara felt the world shift beneath her feet. It was nothing like kissing James had been, perfunctory and brief. This was tender and deep, full of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Clara knew with absolute certainty that her life had just changed irrevocably. The winter passed in a blur of work and growing closeness. Clara continued her work at the lumber office, and Thomas's business began to stabilize thanks to her organizational skills. She paid off her room at the boarding house and started saving money, small amounts, but enough to give her a sense of security she had not felt in years. Henry came to town more frequently now, not just on Sundays but midweek when ranch duties allowed. They stole moments together, walks and conversations and kisses that grew more passionate as Clara's grief continued to heal. The town watched their courtship with approval. Even the most gossipy matrons seemed to agree that Henry was a good man and Clara deserved happiness. Thomas gave his blessing enthusiastically, telling Clara that James would have wanted her to move forward with her life. Only Clara herself sometimes struggled with the speed at which things were developing, feeling guilty for being happy when James had been dead less than 6 months. "You are allowed to live," Maggie told her one evening when Clara confessed her confusion. "That is what living people do. They move forward. They find joy again. James was your husband and you honored him by grieving, but he is gone and you are still here. Do not waste your life feeling guilty about that." In February, Henry took Clara on a longer ride, packing a picnic and driving the wagon out to a beautiful spot where the river widened into a natural pool. The spring wildflowers were just beginning to bloom, splashing the hillsides with color. They ate lunch on a blanket spread under an oak tree, and then Henry took her hand and led her to the edge of the water. "I have been thinking," he said, "about what comes next for us." Clara's heart began to beat faster. "What about it? I want to marry you, Clara." "I have wanted that since Christmas, maybe before, but I know you need time and I do not want to rush you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. "This was my mother's. She gave it to me before I left Missouri, told me to give it to the woman I loved when I found her." "I found her, Clara, I found you." Clara stared at the ring, her emotions a tangled mess. Love and fear and hope all swirled together, making it hard to breathe. "Henry, I am not asking for an answer right now," he interrupted gently. "I am asking you to think about it. To consider what a life together could look like. I have been saving money for years and I have enough to buy land. William knows of a property about 5 miles from here, good grazing land with water access. We could build a house, start our own ranch. It would be hard work, but we would be building something together. A real home, Clara, the kind you never had growing up." "That sounds wonderful," Clara admitted, and it did. The picture he painted was everything she had wanted without knowing she wanted it. Stability, partnership, a future built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "But I am scared, Henry. What if something happens? What if outlaws come, or drought, or any of the 100 things that can destroy a life out here. Then we face it together, Henry repeated, the words he had told her before. I cannot promise you nothing bad will ever happen, but I can promise that whatever does happen, you will not face it alone. I will stand with you through everything. That is what marriage means to me, partnership in all things. Clara looked at the ring, then at Henry's face, open and honest and filled with love. She thought about the months since her arrival in Johnson City, how this man had shown her consistent kindness and patience, how he had never pushed, never demanded, but had simply been there, steady and strong while she healed. She thought about the life he was offering, the future they could build, and she thought about what Maggie had said, that she was allowed to live, that moving forward was not betrayal but survival. Yes, she said, the word coming out strong and sure. Yes, I will marry you. Henry's whoop of joy startled a flock of birds from a nearby tree. He swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing, and then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and everything felt right in a way she had never experienced before. When he slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, it fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. They were married in April, on a sunny Saturday morning with the whole town in attendance. Clara wore a simple dress of cream-colored cotton that Anne Hartley had helped her sew, and wildflowers in her hair. Henry wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony, speaking about love and commitment and the blessing of finding one's partner in life. Thomas gave Clara away, tears streaming down his face, and William Hartley stood up for Henry as his best man. The community dinner that followed was a joyous affair, with music and dancing and more food than Clara had seen in one place since childhood. People came up throughout the afternoon to wish them well, to offer advice and congratulations. Clara felt surrounded by goodwill, wrapped in the warmth of a community that had accepted her as one of their own. As the sun began to set, Henry and Clara slipped away from the celebration. Henry had borrowed William's wagon, and they drove out to the property he had purchased. The land rolled away in gentle hills, covered in spring grass and dotted with oak trees. A small creek ran through one corner, providing water year-round. In the center of the highest hill, Henry had marked out where their house would stand. "It will take time to build," he said as they stood together looking at the view. "Probably most of the summer before we can move in, but William says we can stay in one of the ranch cottages until then." "It is perfect," Clara said, and meant it. She could see it in her mind's eye, the house they would build, the life they would create. Everything is perfect. Henry pulled her into his arms, and they stood together as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. "I love you," he said simply. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "I love you too," Clara replied, the words still new on her tongue but absolutely true. "Thank you for showing me that gentleness is real, that good things can last." "We will last," Henry promised. "Through everything that comes, we will last." And they did. The house rose slowly through the summer of 1879, built with lumber from Thomas's operation and the help of neighbors who came on weekends to contribute labor. Henry worked tirelessly, and Clara helped where she could, learning to swing a hammer and measure boards. By September, they had a sturdy 2-room cabin with plans to add more space as needed. It was small but solid, with a stone fireplace Henry had built himself and windows that looked out over their land. They moved in on a crisp autumn day, carrying their few possessions into the empty rooms. That night, they made love in front of the fireplace, and Clara felt more alive than she ever had before. This was not the dutiful coupling of her first marriage, but something transcendent, a joining of two people who genuinely wanted each other. In December, Clara realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with equal parts joy and terror, but Henry's reaction was pure delight. He became even more protective, insisting she rest more and let him handle the heavy work. Clara humored him mostly, though she continued to help with the ranch work as much as she was able. Their son was born in late summer of 1880, a healthy baby with his father's eyes and a powerful set of lungs. They named him James, after Clara's first husband, a gesture Henry supported without hesitation. "He was part of your story," Henry said, holding the tiny infant with careful hands. "That means he is part of our story, too. It is right to remember him." Little James thrived, and the ranch grew along with him. Henry proved to be a natural cattleman, and his reputation for honesty and fair dealing brought them steady business. Clara managed the books and helped with the animals when needed, and together they built something solid. They added rooms to the house as their family grew. A daughter named Emma in 1882, another son called William after Henry's employer in 1884. The years were not without hardship. They lost cattle to drought in 83 and half their crop to hail in 85. There were scares with illness, late nights worrying over sick children, financial pressures when beef prices dropped. But through it all, they faced everything together, just as Henry had promised. The partnership they had built proved stronger than any challenge. Thomas's lumber business eventually recovered fully, in no small part due to Clara's early organizational work. He married a widow named Josephine in 1881, and the two became regular visitors to the ranch, their children growing up alongside Clara and Henry's kids. The connection to family, the sense of community, gave Clara roots she had never had before. On their 10th anniversary, Henry took Clara back to the spot by the river where he had proposed. The ring he had given her then had worn thin from years of work, and he presented her with a new one, slightly larger, with a small diamond set in the gold. "I wanted to replace it," he said, slipping it on her finger beside the original band. "But I also wanted you to keep the first one, both rings together like our lives, the past and the present all part of the same story." Clara looked at the rings, then at the man beside her, graying now at the temples but still strong, still kind, still hers. "Do you remember what you said to me the day we met, when you helped me down from the stagecoach?" I said. "Gentleness starts now," Henry replied. "You did. And you have kept that promise every single day since." Clara kissed him softly. "I was so scared that day. I expected cruelty because that was all I had ever known, but you showed me something different. You showed me that love can be gentle, that strength does not require hardness, that two people can build something beautiful together." "We did build something beautiful," Henry agreed, looking around at the land they had tamed, the home they had created, the children playing in the yard. "And we are not done yet. There is more to come, more to build, more to share." And there was. More children, including twins in 1890 that made them a family of 7. More land acquired as they expanded the ranch. More years of laughter and tears, triumph and struggle, all faced hand in hand. Their children grew and scattered, though none went far. James took over management of the cattle operation. Emma married a neighboring rancher's son and started her own family nearby. William studied in San Antonio and came back to work with Thomas in the lumber business, eventually taking over when Thomas retired. Clara and Henry grew old together, their hands weathered and their faces lined but their love undimmed. They sat on the porch of the expanded house in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the hills gold, and remembered the scared young widow and the patient cowboy who had promised her gentleness. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked one such evening, when they were both well into their 60s. "Taking a chance on me when I was so broken." Henry took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that plagued his fingers. Not for one single second. You were not broken, Clara. You were hurt. There is a difference. And helping you heal, watching you bloom into the woman you were always meant to be, that has been the greatest privilege of my life. I would not have survived without you, Clara said honestly. When I stepped off that stagecoach, I was at the end of myself. I had nothing left to give. But you saw something in me I could not see in myself. You gave me hope when I had none. We saved each other, Henry replied. I was drifting before I met you, going through the motions of living without really understanding what life could be. You taught me that love is more than just an emotion. It is a choice you make every day, a commitment to stand beside someone through everything. You made me a better man, Clara. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, their lives stretching behind them like a tapestry, woven from moments of joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle, all bound together with the golden thread of their love. When Clara passed away in 1918 at the age of 62, her children and grandchildren surrounded her. Henry held her hand through those final hours, whispering words of love and gratitude. She slipped away peacefully, a soft smile on her face, and Henry felt as though a piece of his soul had been torn away. He lived another 3 years, cared for by his children but diminished without his partner. On a warm spring day in 1921, he took his horse out to the spot by the river where they had courted all those decades ago. He sat under the oak tree, older now but still standing, and thought about the life they had built together. Gentleness starts now. Those words had been a promise, a commitment to show a frightened woman that the world could be kind. And he had kept that promise for 43 years of marriage, through all the ups and downs, the joys and sorrows. They had built a legacy of love, a family that stretched across the Texas Hill Country, rooted in the values they had shared: kindness, partnership, mutual respect, and enduring affection. When Henry's children found him later that afternoon, he had passed quietly, a peaceful expression on his weathered face. They buried him beside Clara on a hill overlooking their ranch, under the wide Texas sky they had both loved. Their descendants continued to work the land, generation after generation, and the story of Clara and Henry became family legend. The tale of the scared widow who stepped off a stagecoach expecting cruelty, and the cowboy who helped her down and promised gentleness, a promise kept through a lifetime of love. It was a story that reminded each new generation that kindness matters, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that the choice to be gentle in a hard world is the truest form of strength. In Johnson City, which had grown from a frontier settlement into a proper town, old-timers still remembered the Roswells. They spoke of Henry's fairness in business dealings, of Clara's generosity to those in need, of the love that had been visible in every interaction between them. They became the standard against which other marriages were measured, proof that real love was not just the stuff of dime novels but something attainable, sustainable, and worth fighting for. The house they built still stood well into the 20th century, occupied by their descendants, expanded and modernized but retaining the original 2 rooms where they had started their life together. The fireplace Henry built with his own hands continued to warm the family on cold winter nights. The land they had claimed and tamed continued to sustain their children and grandchildren. And on quiet evenings, when the sun painted the hills the color of honey and the breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, those who walked that land swore they could feel something special in the air. A presence, perhaps, or just an echo of the love that had been lived there. The love of a woman who had learned to hope again and a man who had taught her that gentleness was not weakness, but the truest form of strength. Their story lived on, a testament to the power of kindness, the resilience of the human heart, and the enduring truth that even in the wildest places, even in the hardest times, love can take root and flourish. All it takes is one person willing to extend a hand, to speak a word of comfort, to promise that gentleness starts now. And sometimes, that is enough to change everything.